Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
One day when Jesus was praying alone in the presence of his disciples, he put this question to them: "Who do the crowd say I am?" And they answered, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, and others say one of the ancient prophets come back to life. But you," he said, "who do you say I am?" It was Peter who spoke up. "The Christ of God," he said. But he gave them strict orders not to tell anybody anything about this. "The Son of Man," he said, "is destined to suffer grievously, to be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and to be put to death, and to be raised up on the third day." Then to all he said, "If anyone wants to be a follower of mine, let him renounce himself, take up his cross every day, and follow me. For anyone who wants to save his life will lose it. But anyone who loses his life for my sake, that man will save it." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So yeah, this is a buckle your seatbelt day. Now this is one of the tough readings. It's squarely central to the message of Jesus Christ. And I would say that it is one of Jesus' messages that is completely opposite to every instinct that a human has. Completely opposite. Do you ever wake up in the morning and say, "Okay, how can I suffer today?" You ever do that? Huh? Or wake up in the morning and say, "Yes, let me find a cross and pick it up today." Do you do that? The very brain that we have works in a way that when we see threat, all the higher functions shut down, and all the lower functions of fight or flight kick in, and you just find yourself either fighting or fleeing. Am I? That's you too? Or you got something special that the rest of us didn't get? So when Jesus is saying that if you want to be a disciple of mine, then suffering is part of the deal, this really is not a great selling point. I remember once journeying with a young man, and he was doing really well in his journey, and had come to the point where all kinds of sufferings were coming his way. I mean, in every kind of way. And from places he would never have expected. And it was just happening, relentless. And I said, "Well, Jesus did say anyone who wants to be a follower of mine, let him renounce himself, pick up his cross, and follow me." And he looked at me and he said, "That is a terrible marketing strategy." The devil has a far better marketing strategy. Give us what we want, give us pleasure, give us the things we want to have, and seduce us into going wherever we want to go. That's a far better strategy for human beings. Well, yeah. But clearly God knows something that we need. Correct? God knows something that we need. When your child is loving you and you're giving them everything that they want and spoiling them rotten with everything they want, is that love? Is that love? When your child is facing tough times and you have to be difficult with them and really hold a much higher bar than they would like to hold, and really help them beyond that threshold where they are comfortable in themselves and their responses, and you're holding that higher bar for them and it's stretching them, and they look at you and say, "Mom, I love you." Is that love? So you understand the dynamic? You understand the dynamic? The dynamic is that if we're getting everything we want, is that really love? Remember, the logic of the gospel is love. Always, God is love. That's the one sentence that stands on its own with no explanation. God is love. The very nature of God is to love. The very nature of God is to be loving to us. And when this lover, this consummate lover, looks at us and says, if you want to be a disciple of mine, you need to suffer, then you know that there is something in suffering that is important for love. This is not punishment. This is not masochism. This is not a sadistic God looking and asking us to suffer for no good reason. The very nature of God is love. You know, I think that this is one of the most difficult teachings of Jesus. There are many hard teachings. But this one, now, a first century Jew, I want you to remember what a first century Jew would have heard. When we hear a cross, we think of a nice little ornament that we keep around our neck. We have one at home. We have them in the car. We have them everywhere. And that's what we think of. When a first century Jew would have heard of pick up your cross, they would have heard take the most torturous, disastrous instrument that humans have ever designed for torturing another human being. You pick it up freely, willingly, and acceptingly, and follow me. Can you hear that now? Oh, they've gone silent now. Huh? Oh, they've gone silent? Really? Serious? Really? That you pick up the instrument that is most terrifying to you. Because what is a human wired to do? To preserve their life. That's what we're wired to do, to preserve our life. And what is Jesus saying to us? We have to be able to give our life. We have to give it and to give it freely. And that's why the martyrs are always seen as these great heroic figures who gave their life and lived the gospel to the nth degree in shedding their blood for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So if we listen to the text again, one day when Jesus was praying alone in the presence of his disciples, so only Luke has him praying. Mark and Matthew have him in Caesarea Philippi, which is an outmost part of Israel. It's the furthest part away from Jerusalem. After that is Lebanon. Have him out in the extremes. Luke has him praying and asking the crowd, "Who do you say I am?" And they answered, "John the Baptist, Elijah, or one of the ancient prophets come back." And there's one common theme: all of them have died. You are somebody who has clearly died already and has come back to life. Why? Because they understood that this was not a normal human being. At least his contemporaries understood that he was not just a normal human being floating around the place. And John the Baptist, who Herod had killed, Elijah, who had gone up into heaven, one of the other prophets. And then he says, "But you, who do you say I am?" And this is really the tough question. Who do you say he is? You know, when you're sitting in church, you're meditating, of course he's Jesus Christ. Of course he's Son of God, and we could use all the wonderful religious formula, correct? When somebody gives you a bad drive, who do you say he is? Y'all help me now. On that day when you wake up, and from the time you wake up, everything is going wrong. Everything going wrong. The hair settling, the sugar run out, there are no coffee, you have a flat tire, you know those kind of days? And in the midst of that kind of day, who do you say he is? Not hearing you. Not hearing you. Well, on a day when you and someone you love has a major row, and you've just said things that you wish you could hold them and pull them back and stuff them back into your mouth, but they're done out already. Who do you say he is? Because that's out at the periphery. That's when we are at our periphery. Who do we say he is out there at the periphery? And I think there's a different confession inside of here than outside of that periphery. What do you all think? Huh? Who do we say he is? You see, brothers and sisters, when discipleship goes to its absolute maturity, we can confess him as God, as Son of God, as begotten of the Father. We can, both in the center of our faith, life, and devotion, and at the periphery, when we are pushed in every way possible to the edges of our frailty. We can, at both places, confess him as God. When we are in progress still, well, you know, we have one confession here, and, well, out there's something else. You know the story of little Johnny? You know, little Johnny went to church. He went every Sunday. Little Johnny went to hell for what he did on Monday. Clearly on Monday, little Johnny didn't have the same confession of faith as he had on Sunday. Who do you say he is? And this is a haunting question that has come down through the ages, that every single one of us must answer, not just here when we are coming to the Eucharist and we are filled with religious sentiment, but when we are pushed, we must answer that too. Jesus says, the Son of Man. So Peter is the one who spoke up. The Christ of God, he said. But he gave strict orders not to say anything. Israel was expecting a Messiah. And that expectation had spread everywhere. And people at the time of Jesus were expecting the Messiah. They thought John the Baptist was the Messiah. John pointed to Jesus. John asked, are you the one who is to come, or must we wait on another? Everyone is expecting a Messiah. And Peter names it, you are the Christ of God. You are the anointed one of God. But Peter didn't get it. Because everybody was expecting a Messiah who would come on a big white horse, ride down into Jerusalem, put Herod and Pilate and all of them to flight, lock down the block properly, have everybody in total freedom with no occupying force and with no one occupying them, and then ride on to Rome and deal with Rome properly and secure not only the sovereignty of Israel, but Israel as first among all nations. That's what the expectation was. A Messiah of power, a military man of might. That's what they're expecting. And what they received was so different. When Jesus says, the Son of Man is destined to suffer grievously, to be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and to be put to death, and to be raised up on the third day. No one was ready to hear what Jesus said. In the other Gospels, Peter remonstrates with him, surely, Lord, this must never happen to you. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. It's one thing to expect a Messiah. It's one thing to want a God. It's one thing to worship God. It's a whole other thing to understand that God is a suffering, fragile God who is suffering in front of our eyes as something that our eyes cannot behold. Who could believe what we have seen, and to whom has the power of Yahweh been revealed? Like a sapling, he grew up in front of us, like a root in arid ground. And we scorned our eyes to look at him as something rejected and despised by men. It's something totally different, brothers and sisters, to understand that when God comes, he doesn't come as a conquering hero. He comes as a fragile Messiah who is crucified at our hands and allows himself to be subjected to all the violence that we have to give. That's something completely different. And that idea is so difficult for us human beings to contain. We want a powerful God, correct? My daddy bigger than your daddy. That's what we want, correct? My God bigger than your God. Our first reading, which is a prophecy that was said, Zechariah was one of the last of the prophets, probably about 200 years before Jesus. And he gives this cryptic verse which, when it was heard first, would never have been understood. That when we hear it now, we must understand, we understand it so differently. It is the Lord who speaks. Over the house of David and the citizens of Jerusalem, I will pour out a spirit of kindness and prayer. A spirit of? Kindness and prayer. How is he going to do that? Pour out a spirit of kindness and prayer. That would be compassion and devotion. How is God going to do that? He goes on to say, they will look on the one whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as for an only son, and weep for him as people weep for a firstborn child. Already 200 years before Jesus comes, the cross is already in plain view. 200 years before. They will look on the one whom they have, and they will weep for him as for an only son, as for a firstborn child. When that day comes, there will be great mourning in Judah, like the mourning over the plains. And when that day comes, the fountain will open for the house of David and for the citizens of Jerusalem for sin and iniquity. Cryptic. But now we could look back at this text and say, oh, John told us, from his side flows fountains of living water. On the cross, when the lance pierced his side, blood and water flowed, which we know to be the sacramental life of the church, baptism and Eucharist, which is how a spirit of kindness and prayer flows out through the whole world, through the fountain from the side of Christ. Kindness and prayer and devotion flow out, because it is through his wounds that we are healed. Brothers and sisters, one of the challenges that we're facing in our time is that we want a big, all-powerful God to lick up all the miscreants in this world and deal with them properly and put everything back right. Correct? And we have a couple on our list we want to add to the universal ones one time. While he's at it, we have a few that we want him to deal with one time. Correct? Not so? I'm sure everybody have their list. That is not the God of Jesus Christ. That's not the God of Jesus Christ. And that's the problem. We have an idea of God that is not who has been revealed to us. To talk about a powerless God, to talk about a God who has wounds. When he appears to Thomas, he makes Thomas put his hand in the wound. The wound is still in the risen body of Jesus Christ. It's to understand the fragility of the human condition. It's to understand, brothers and sisters, that power is not the way to salvation. Power is not the way to salvation. Anytime we're reaching for power, we're walking away from salvation. The way to salvation is always a way of powerlessness. It's always a way of suffering. It's always a way of meekness, because the meek will inherit the earth. The gospel today is asking of us something of a conversion of heart and a conversion of how we see God. Not as a big tyrant and powerful guy, but look upon him whom we have pierced. Raymond Truffaut had this wonderful play, We Crucified Him. Whenever this is tough for you, just find a crucifix and sit in front of it. Sit in front of it and stare at him. Literally, just keep your eyes gazing on him, as the first reading asks of us. And when you stare at him, just say to yourself, you did this for me. You did this for me. Look at him. Open your eyes, look at him. You did this for me. What am I willing to do for you?